Rarely when I begin a new piece do I really have an idea of what its outcome is going to be. And often I'll finish something or finish it to the point where it's ready to be quilted, and I'll look down and go, just not doing it for me. And do I think the quilting's going to do it for me? And maybe it won't, or maybe I don't plan on quilting it much, or something. And I'll look and go, is there anything I can do that's a quick, simple fix? Well, when I finished this guy and had this wide border on it, and the border was overwhelming, and I thought, oh, I'll just trim it down. And then I thought, well, I wonder what it would look like with a curvy border. And so I cut a curvy border and fell in love with it. And so I've kind of been making curvy borders ever since then. A curvy edge quilt can be a problem for those who have never used a bias cut binding, but it's really not a big deal. It's pretty easy to do. This one happens to have no binding. I did it in the pillowcase style, but I've done many with bindings, so it just requires you to cut a bias binding. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to cut this. I do not pre-draw the curve. This is just a free form cut curve. One thing that I'll point out though is that I like to include a little point every once in a while. So those little points just add this little bit of interest. So that's how I feel kind of about this quilt. This quilt to me it's not necessarily my style. I was exploring using these dyed pieces of vintage things, but it's kind of boring, it's kind of dull, and I think it's going to be a little bit more interesting with a curvy edge. So I'm going to cut that edge for you right here. Now generally speaking, I'd have a larger mat, but this mat will do. So I'm going to try to get the most length out of the mat that I can. And basically I'm not going to have anything too deep that's going to make it difficult to put a binding on. And I don't want my corners to be too pointy that will make it difficult to put a binding on. So I'll start on one edge here, and once I get started with the cutting, I'm going to hold my far edge because otherwise it's going to creep. It's going to want to move with the cutter. So I'm going to start right here with a very gentle curve near the corner because I don't want that corner to be hard to bind. And now I'm going to just cut a curve. I'm going to look at the elements that are near the edge of the piece so I don't cut into them. And there we go. Very easy. I don't have to pre-draw that. I can let it kind of just be organic and grow into whatever it grows into. Now this is a pretty tight corner, so I want to make sure this one stays a little bit square like it is. So I'm not going to cut in much at all. And I've got not a whole lot of room here, so I'm going to go to that edge, like so, come over here so that I'm not cutting any of that edge off, so I have at least that 1/4 inch, and begin again. I'm going to go ahead and put a point right here. So you see I came off the edge. Now I'm going to come in a little bit deep here so that I have a point right there. So you see that wonderful little point. That adds kind of a repeat of the corner points, and it's interesting. So again, I'm going to get as much of this on as I can, and I'm just going to continue cutting gentle curves with my rotary cutter that are not pre-drawn. So now you can see the one side with the bottom, and we can see it's already looking more interesting. In fact, I could be really artsy if I wanted to and leave 2 sides straight and have 2 sides curvy if I wanted. But unfortunately for me, this is the direction it goes, and it would look better if those 2 sides were over here. So I'm going to keep cutting curves. I have a point right here. Normally I would want to point somewhere in here, but there's a lot happening here on the edge. I think if I put a point right here, there's stuff happening there too, whereas this edge is kind of boring. So I think I'm going to put another point down in here, so at least I have 2 of them, and they're somewhat opposite. So that's just something I'm going to kind of plan. A very gentle curve there so that I don't have a difficult time binding. And now I'm going to make that point right there. And then I'm going to come in so that I get that point. Now I want to come down pretty tight here so that I don't have a difficult corner. There we go. So you can see the balance that is being formed on this outside edge by repeating that. I might repeat one right here because if I cut this little portion of this flower out, there's an area here that's kind of open for that. 3 is always better than 2. odd numbers. Again, a shallow to make that corner easy with the binding. Paying attention to how much space I have next to a design element close to the edge. And so you see, you don't have to do it a continuous cut. You can lift up the rotary cutter and move it around. So I think I am going to put in a point somewhere near here. This one I don't want pointed, so I'm going to continue with the curve, but a gentle curve here so that I have room for this design element. And I'm going to cut out that flower with a deep curve there. And then I'm going to put my point and then finish off. And again, an easier corner. Wow. So I don't know about you, but I think that really added something to it. It took something that was kind of bordering on being a little too syrupy and sweet and added a little bit of funky edge, and I think added some interest. So now I'm going to put a binding on it that's probably going to be this dark violet and really finish off that edge well. So see how easy it is to cut free-form curves? Try it on a quilt that you get done with it and you're like, it's not doing it for me. Curve those edges. It might really perk it up.